very good evening to everyone. I'm in Goa, here with my family for a vacation for a week. And Goa has its own pace and therefore challenges of technology. So apologies for a little bit of a delay. Please join me, all of you, in welcoming a three-member team from BBC Media Action, an organization which has been supporting FSM and sanitation. I'm not mentioning the other sectors that they have already done a lot of work in, but specifically in sanitation, their contribution is immense for bringing in a strategic perspective to behavior change communication, to helping cities think through what they are doing in terms of what they want to achieve, how do they measure what they have achieved, how much budgets they should keep aside. So a whole lot of thinking that needs to go up front when a sanitation program is being launched at a citywide is what we are going to discuss and learn from the experience of BBC Media Action. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Ragini, Ms. Virender, and Ms. Rithira. And they have planned a wonderful 1.5 hour session today, an interactive session, and I would not like to take any more of their time. So over to the able hands of BBC Media Action.
Thank you, Malini. Thank you so much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We hope you've all been keeping safe and are in good spirits during these difficult times. Thank you, ASCII, for inviting us to be part of this session. It's a pleasure to be here today, this Saturday evening. I'm Rithira Kumar, Senior Project Manager at BBC Media Action. My experience has been in communications and advertising over the last 12 years or so. And I've been working closely with the partner organizations at the NFSSM Alliance to assess communication needs in urban sanitation. With me today, co-presenting are my colleagues Ragini Pasricha, Director of Content Strategy, who has 20 years of experience working on social and behavior change communication across a range of development issues. We also have Varinder Gambhir, Director Research, with over 17 years of research experience across India and the United Kingdom, with focus on generating insights and evaluating social and behavior change communication interventions. Now, the objective of the session today is to learn how to plan, budget, implement, and monitor a social and behavior change communication intervention. But before we do that, Shibil, will you be projecting the presentation, please? Before we do that, I'll do a quick introduction of our work as well. BBC Media Action is the independent international NGO arm of the BBC. We believe in the power of media and communication to do good, providing trusted information, stories, and ideas that generate debate and discussion and bridge divides. Globally, we work across thematic areas in health, education, governance and rights, resilience, and humanitarian response. Now, we are not funded by the BBC. Our work is funded by donors like Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and USAID. With the support of BMGF, our work aims to change people's knowledge, attitudes, and behavior on both urban and rural sanitation. We also provide technical support on social and behavior change communication to the Government of India at the national, state, and occasionally at the city level as well. And at BBC Media Action, audiences are at the heart of everything we do. And that is what has determined our approach to media and communications. Now, before we take you through some key aspects to the process, plan, and practice, we would like a little insight into the audience present here. So, Shibil, if you would, we'd like to have a quick poll among the people here. We've got a couple of questions.
Sure, ma'am.
Sure.
I'm just sharing the first one.
Sure, Jyotsna.
Yeah. So there's just a quick, small error. So the last point, developing, I'll just read the question. As implementers and practitioners, do you study your audience before developing the communication material? So sorry about the last word is missing. So we have got 28 responses. Request other participants also to please answer. So there are 35 responses. Do you want me to share the responses?
We can, I think, see the responses on the screen, right?
Yeah, go ahead, Chaksha.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, you can see it now.
Thank you. This is Ragini, and it's lovely to see that a lot of you are interacting with the audiences before you design a communication. Shubal, would you pull up the next slide, please?
For the question. And the next.
And the next. Right. So after the poll, can we have the next slide, please? Right. Let's begin posing some very fundamental questions about SVCC. I'm going to ask you to talk about fecal sludge management, which has become a priority for many of us, right? And let me just, even before we get into that, let's talk about a behavior that all of us are struggling with. We have a pandemic on, and many people are choosing not to wear a mask, or if they're wearing a mask, they're not wearing it correctly. I'm going to ask you to type into chat why you think that is happening. Why are people either not wearing a mask or not wearing it correctly? Can you type your responses in the chat? Okay. So Chanchal feels that we have not been communicating the reasons for wearing a mask. Had we simply told them why they must wear a mask, of course everybody would. And Pankaj thinks that no, it's because masks are uncomfortable and everybody is not wearing them. So no need. Let me just look at all your answers. These are very interesting answers. So people think they are invincible. Malini, that's fantastic. So they don't think anything's going to happen to them. And if nothing's going to happen to you, why should you wear a mask? Anu again says discomfort. Behavior. Mohammed ji. That's not why people perform this behavior of not wearing a mask. Think of a reason. Why are they not wearing a mask? So they're overconfident. They don't know now the severity and the role that they play in breaking the chain of transmission. Excellent. And they're just neglectful. Maharshi ji is saying that they're just plain neglectful. Or they may not be able to purchase a mask. I think all of you have brought up really fantastic reasons for not wearing a mask. But what is critical for me is that all of you have collectively pointed out multiple determinants of behavior. You know, we have people who think that if they only knew, Chanchalji, for example, if they only knew, if they had correct information, of course they would do it. But even if you have correct information, will discomfort vanish? You know, or if you think that I have some kind of Suraksha Kavach, I am invincible. So this is a perception about yourself. It's not about the disease. It's not about the chain of transmission. You know, it's about how you see yourself and that supreme confidence in yourself, as Vaibhavji said. So, or it's just, you know, I couldn't care less. It's too much of a problem. I'm negligent. It suffocates me. See, now that's very, I mean, you want to wear a mask to live, right? Not to be suffocated. And, you know, my point in asking all of you this question was that it is so tempting to believe that if we give people knowledge, they will perform a behavior. As you can see from your own experience, from your own responses, that behavior is it's composed of multiple nuances and multiple factors. In behavior change communication, we call this determinants of behavior. So what determines a behavior can be multiple reasons. And if you leave this session remembering nothing except this one point, that knowledge does not automatically lead to behavior, I will think that we have communicated a very important principle of SBCC to you. Let's keep this discussion going. Can we see the next slide, Shubal? So I'm going to take a few minutes of your time to talk about why at all we imagine that knowledge is key. And the answer goes back to how health communication and development communication first began. What happened was that to begin with, we had what is called IEC. I'm sure it's a term that all of you are very familiar with, information, education, communication. But I don't know if you know that the root of this term is from the very early days of development and health programming. So governments all over the world believed that if they built clinics and hospitals, people would automatically come and avail of services. It didn't quite work out that well. They weren't seeing enough footfalls. And so they initiated community outreach. So you had outreach workers like auxiliary nurse midwives who went out and who told people that they needed to come for certain services. But the offshoot of this clinic era of health programming is IEC, which is a communication approach that has its root in how doctors talk to patients. So doctors tell patients, they are the experts after all, and they tell the patient what medicines to take, when to take them, and when to return. They give the patient a certain amount of information, they educate them, and that's that. So it's going to be pretty obvious that IEC is one-way communication, and it's very top-down. The patient doesn't really have much to say in this whole exercise. One party is the expert, the other party simply has to listen and do what they are told to do. How do you take this approach and translate it to a situation when someone is not ill and not seeking treatment? What if you're talking to mothers about how to bring up their children well? Or, talking to people who smoke or who need to lose weight? There are 100 situations in which we want to influence behavior. And I want to acknowledge that IEC works really well when you want to, say, publicize a scheme of benefits. This is what your government is going to offer to XYZ categories. But where it comes to voluntary behavior change, we have to acknowledge that people are the experts on their own lives. And any information you give them will be assessed by them against what they want or what they need to do. So once programmers realized this, we moved on to what is known as behavior change communication. Now, behavior change communication looked at behavior much more closely. It didn't assume that knowledge was all you people needed, that somebody who was an expert would educate them and voila, things would change. They looked at whether people had the opportunity to perform a behavior, whether they had the ability to perform a behavior or the motivation to perform such a behavior. They realized that it had to fit in with the values and beliefs that people had. So, it's important to understand that there are many factors other than knowledge, but something was still missing. Even with BCC, we weren't getting the results we wanted. Does anybody want to take a guess on why? Any volunteer? Put your hand up or unmute yourself. No? Okay, so it's because the entire onus of change was placed on one individual. But behavior is not performed by an individual living in an island. Behavior is something that is happening in a context, and behavior change communication did not take that context into account. So we have the next evolution of communication, which is social and behavior change communication. It takes a much more holistic approach to behavior change, and it looks at both the individual as well as the context in which they perform a behavior. Shubhal, can we have the next slide, please?
Ragini, there is
Yes.
a question. If, in case you want to take it now or later is also fine, by Mr. Nagesh.
In the interests of time, should we take all questions after?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Huh? I'll definitely come back to it. Thanks, Malini. What you're going to see in this model that I've shown you is, it's called the socio-ecological model for change. It takes into account the entire ecosystem in which a behavior is performed. As you can see, at the heart of this circle is the individual who is expected to perform a behavior. But the very next circle of influence are that person's spouses, their friends, their family, their neighbors, gatekeepers. Who is it who belongs to an individual's reference network? So you see, not everybody matters. If you were to show me a behavior that is performed by a tribe living in the Congo, I'll say that's not me. What matters to me is what people like me do. So that's what we call somebody's reference network. The next layer of influence is service providers, community leaders, grassroots organizations. Now, these layers are taking into account the social and cultural factors that either promote a behavior or inhibited a recommended behavior. But it also takes into account the accompanying services, the infrastructure, whether the product you are telling people to use is in place. So for example, if we were to talk to parents about sending their children to school, but the closest school is 20 to 25 kilometers away. Now that is first a problem you have to remedy, or a government has to remedy, before you start communicating with that individual at the heart of your intervention. So social and behavior change communication is factoring in even the policy and even the economic environment in which a recommended behavior has to be performed. These are important points to keep in mind, because the success or failure of your communication will depend on these factors. And we have to acknowledge that culture and networks influence people's behavior, that sometimes people don't always control the issues that determine behavior, that people's decisions about health and about well-being compete with other priorities. As you yourself said, that I may know that I need to wear a mask, but because it suffocates me, I'm not prepared to wear it, or wear it for a very long time. So it helps to look at the ways in which personal and environmental factors are interrelated and how they influence each other. And if you really want to create sustainable change, sustainable behavior change, your intervention needs to target the population, the practitioners, the organizations, as well as the entire system. Can we have the next slide, please? So now I'm going to ask you to tell me about, we're going to talk today about FSM behaviors, right? Now I want you to tell me about one, each of you, tell me about one FSM behavior that you want to change. Put it into chat. And before you start doing that, I'm going to ask you to keep in mind that don't give me an issue. Don't tell me that there's, sludge is not being treated. Put it down as a behavior, which means somebody has to do something, right? And the second point that I want you to remember is that a behavior that communication can change? Is it linked to people, or is it linked to the supply side of an intervention? So for example, if you need PPE for sanitation workers, that is an issue that procurement will address, not communication with the general population. Now with that, please put the one behavior you want to change for FSM in chat. Okay, Hemaji, I'm going to ask you to reframe that. Put it down as a behavior. It's a wonderful issue that you've put up there. But tell me who has to do what. The issue is perfectly fine, but put it as a behavior. Premchandji, people should always construct soak pits. So I'm connected to a sewer line. Should I be constructing a soak pit?
Sorry?
Your behavior is that people should always construct soak pits.
No, there is other part also, it's not only, I said, as we see in urban area, most of the people are used to connect the septic tank directly to the drains. So I see half behavior there, but that's people should not connect. That one I wanted to say there.
So I'm so glad you brought up this issue, because now people has to be redefined by us as people who are not connected to sewer lines. It's not for all people, it's not for everybody, it's people who are not connected to sewers need to construct soak pits. Should we modify that?
Right. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Retrofit the toilet containment with, who should do this, Nageshji? Specify an actor. You put the verb in of retrofitting, but who is the actor? Who should perform this behavior? Who is not ready to pay for FSM? Anu?
The toilet owners.
Right. So the attitude of flush and forget needs to change. Every citizen should be aware of what exactly happens to the excreta. People need to use the toilet, not defecate in the open. Mohammed ji, again, I will ask you, are all of us defecating in the open? We need to be specific about who we are talking to. As behavior change communication specialists, we need to be very particular. I mean, if you were to come to say this to Malini or Ithira or me, we'd be kind of outraged. It's about, I don't need this message. I always use the toilet, right? So let's get really specific about behaviors and about who needs to change them. Does everybody need to? Do school children need to? Do householders need to? Do householders in slums need to? Can we have the next slide? Can we have the next slide, Shibal? Right. Let's take up one behavior, the one behavior that people tend to flush and forget. We don't have too much time, otherwise I would have loved to actually discuss all the behaviors that you've put up, but let's talk about why people flush and forget. As a group, let's think, what is it that they know or don't know? Why are they flushing and forgetting? Anybody? No, nobody is willing to hazard a guess on why people flush and forget. They don't know where the flush water ultimately goes. Excellent. What do you think they're thinking? So this is knowledge, but thinking is also, when we talk about attitudes, when we talk about beliefs. So what do you think the attitudes are? One part is knowledge, as you said. That they don't know where the water from the flush is going. Attitudinally, what do you think is happening? Malini, they think they are releasing, the mindset is out of sight and out of mind. Thank you, Vidya. So you don't need to bother about stuff you don't see. Now that means, that's a lovely cue that you've given us, and I'm sure Ithira and Varinder will talk about this later. What are the feelings that they have? It's not their responsibility. And in terms of doing, is it my job? Nah, it's the government's. Great. Again, what we are seeing is that when we talk about this behavior of flushing and forgetting, we need to be factoring in multiple nuances to the behavior before we design a communication issue. Okay. So just for the sake of definitions, knowledge is always about facts and correct facts. So, you know, people may have knowledge that there are 3 modern contraceptive methods that are available to them. Thereafter, do they have correct facts? If they're living with a lot of myths and misconceptions, we know that it's incomplete knowledge. So when we talk about knowledge within an SPCC framework, it's the correct or true facts that they need to know, minus the myths and misconceptions. When we talk about thinking, we are referring to attitudes and beliefs about the behavior. Now, an attitude is always evaluative. An attitude is it a good thing to do? Is it a bad thing to do? Is it unpleasant to do or difficult to perform? Will it harm me? Will it help me? That's the kind of, you know, cost benefit analysis that people do before they adopt a behavior. Feelings are like motivation. Feelings are about, you know, do you really want to do it? So, you know, you think it's good. I mean, if you were to tell me, Ragini, do you want to lose weight? Yes, of course I do. How do you feel about it? It's too difficult. And, you know, and doing is not the actual performance of the behavior, but the ability to perform the behavior. Do you have self-efficacy? Do you have the required skills? Do you have the required money? Do you control the behavior or does somebody else control it? So yes, I would put my children into school, but my mother-in-law thinks they're too young to go, right? And the mother-in-law is controlling the behavior. So for every behavior, and especially for the FSM behaviors that we address, we should be looking at this combination of factors. So a quick definition of SPCC, can we have the next slide? Shubhal? Social and behavior change is a process. But when I talk about a process, it is not a magic wand. It's not going to happen in one day. There are stages in which you move big chunks of population towards the behaviors that you want. It's not an idea. People often talk about communication as an idea. Communication is driven by theory. It's driven by behavioral science. There are models of how and why people change behavior, and it would do us all a lot of good to study those models and see which ones apply to the work we do. The third point in red, because that's really an area that's the most important for me, it is a very research-based process. We are not just taking a guess. To the extent possible, we are trying to make it evidence-based decision-making about every aspect of communication. And Rithira and Varinder will talk you through this in a lot more detail, but please remember that research is very important. And based on behavioral science, based on research, based on our understanding of the process of change, we develop strategies that address not just an individual, but the communities in which they perform the behavior, and if necessary, the social context in which the behavior is performed. So I'm going to hand over to Varinder to, for the next part of this session and to really go into depth on research.
Thanks, Ragini, for this. Before I start with the slides, Shibil, I think we had a small poll. I wanted to just understand the audience a bit better. So there were a few questions on use of research by everybody. So if we can put up some of those questions.
Right, ma'am. So we're doing it one after the other. So I'm just I'll launch the first question.
Perfect. Thank you. What evidence do you all rely on? First-hand research, surveys, qualitative, quantitative research that you might have commissioned, secondary research, which is available for us, both of these or none of these? If you can just click on these.
We have 30 responses right now.
Okay. We're doing a small research of our own so that we are better informed in the presentation.
Yeah, so 75% has responded. So do you want me to show the responses?
I think so, yeah, Jyotsna.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. So 80% of all of us basically feel that, it could be first-hand research or secondary research. And then I think the second in the line is first-hand research, where, can customize the research. And thankfully, I think it's great to sort of know that evidence is something that everybody's taking pretty seriously. I think, Jyotsna, if the second, next poll on research after this can also be put in.
Yeah,
it'd be
sure.
great. Thanks.
It's there live.
Yeah, I can see that. So have you pre-tested communication outputs before implementing them? How many of you would say that, before launching your film or your newsletter or, your, say, outdoor campaign, how many of you have pre-tested your communication outputs before you've implemented and taken it to scale?
$35 responses. Request other participants also to please put your answers. Yeah, we have 75%. I'm sharing the results. Yeah.
Great, thank you. So 74% of us have basically pre-tested our communication output. So I think this is really, really heartening to know when, as a researcher, I'm starting off talking about research. So we can move to the next slide, Jyotsna.
There's one more poll, ma'am. Do you want to take it now?
I think that's on Impact Eval. We can take it later.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, thank you. Just, talking about research, I thought I'll start first by talking about how, so the next slide, Jyotsna. Yeah, next one. Perfect. Thank you so much. So, first, let's just talk about how and why audience research is important. What exactly is audience research? And this is, of course, what the name suggests. You are researching your target audience to understand their existing behaviors as well as the determinants of their behaviors and, their detailed demographics, their media habits. Like Ragini mentioned earlier as well, before we start the process of bringing about behavior change, we first need to understand, what are the behaviors we are changing and why our audiences are already doing it. Like, the example of mask wearing, instead of just keep saying wear a mask, I think if the communication is addressing the barriers and motivating people to act, I think that will be a much useful communication. That will be something that's intended very sharply towards reasons why people are not wearing masks. So it's very important to kind of start with that research. And research will help you define where people are right now, where they need to get to, and what will it take them, to get from this point A to that point B, right? So which barriers need to be addressed so that people can, we can finally achieve those outcomes. We can only get these answers by reaching out to our audiences, by understanding them a bit more. Now, the type of research that we apply can, of course, it's great to know that I have a very research savvy audience here. So I think when I say that it could be a detailed ethnography or an immersive exercise or, a quantitative exercise to understand the knowledge and the behaviors, I'm assuming, everybody knows here. Or it could be a mix of both, right? So, and if there are any questions around what I'm saying, please feel free to put that as well. But the kind of research, we all know, there are various ways. There could be deep rooted attitudes that we are checking. There could be quick quantitative surveys, the ones that we are doing here to understand our audiences. but the objective of it can only be determined when we know the objective of the program, and then hence the objective of why we are doing the research. But what's important is that research is needed not just at the start of the intervention to inform your program intervention, to unpack what our audiences is thinking about, but the fact that it is a continuous process during our intervention. We need to be informed at the very start, at doing a formative research. We need to pre-test our outputs, which again, majority of you, I think about 70-75% of you said that you have pre-tested your outputs, been more informed when you've scaled up the intervention. That's what basically pre-testing will help you for. And at the same time, there is monitoring and evaluation. Monitoring, which will tell us, I will talk in much more detail about all of this, but just to say that it's a very continuous process. And monitoring and evaluation, of course, is very important for us to know that we are moving in the right direction, and we are constantly monitoring it and evaluating our work. We are evaluating our short-term goals, we are evaluating our long-term goals, right? So now I would like to explain a bit of the research that we did and keep it on the sanitation focus, because we've been working on fecal sludge management for some time, and many of you have actually mentioned things that out of sight is out of mind. You all have mentioned about fecal sludge not being a priority because people can't see it. It's very difficult to act. So I think all of this came out in our research as well, and I'll just take you through that journey of what we found out specific to our sanitation work. Next slide, please, Shibil. Thank you. So I'm assuming that the this part of the urban sanitation value chain is something that all of you are pretty aware about. For us, the focus was on containment, emptying, and transport. And our research very clearly showed that, across the sanitation value chain, the primary gaps that we had to address on containment, for example, was making the households, and these are households that are, connected to septic tanks or connected to insanitary drains. They had to be made aware of the right kind of containment structure, and how important containing the fecal sludge properly is. So we were not talking to people who are connected to sewer lines. We were talking to those who have septic tanks or who are insanitary toilet owners. Within emptying, we understood from our research that the households do not desludge their tanks until they overflow, or there is a backflow in the toilet, or there is a stench. It is only during a crisis that people were thinking of desludging. There were really no proactive desludgers. People were doing it as a reactive exercise. The desludging was being done as a reactive exercise, because people just go for convenience, manual cleaning sometimes over mechanical desludging of tanks. It was convenience, which was the key factor. Now, thirdly, we wanted our audiences, based on our research, we knew that we wanted our audiences to ensure that fecal sludge is transported efficiently and safely to a treatment plant. Because the other thing that came out very clearly was that they were not threatened with open discharge. We had to make that threat more personal, and we had to make that threat more urgent. People otherwise did not feel that, I think again, some of you said that people just flush and they were forgetting. They flush and they forget. It is not important where the sludge is going at the end of the day. So across the value chain, these three were the focus areas for us, where we had to tell the community at various steps, take them through this journey, and ensure that it's reaching at the rightful place. Because any gap or lapse in this standard operating procedure would basically lead to a chain reaction and cause impact on the health and the environment. Can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. Thanks, Shibil. First, a little bit of detail on our formative research. We went to about 1,740 households in Narsapur, Andhra Pradesh, Tiruchirappalli in Tamil Nadu, and Berhampur in Odisha. And we did a mixed method research. So because we didn't want to just understand the what of what people are doing, but also why are they doing what they're doing, right? So we also did 25 focus group discussions, and we did 15 very immersive sessions with our audiences, and we did ethnographies with them as well, which basically meant that we spent about at least 4 to 5 hours in their houses, looking at, sometimes going and finding out when they're desludging, what is really happening. So we spent a lot of time doing all of this. Our TG was not just, the decision makers on fecal sludge management, but also the influencers of fecal sludge management. So we went to men as well as women. And, again, the households were those who were not connected to the sewer lines. Now, before I get into, the details of the data that you see on this slide, can you all just tell me, looking at this slide, what would you say about the knowledge levels here? And what would you say about the attitude levels? So, feel free to put it in the chat. Thanks, Malini. I think TG, of course, is the target group. So if you all can just tell me, based on, what you see on the slide, 90% believe fecal sludge was flowing into the open drains and it can spread diseases, but 53% were bothered by the open drains in their surroundings. What would you say about the knowledge levels? Are these high or are these low? And 78% believe, thanks Pankaj, that's right, high level of knowledge. 78% believe a septic tank should be as large as possible. And 78% believe the government is responsible for desludging. What do you think about the mindset? I mean, is it a correct attitude to kind of have that it's the government's responsibility to do the desludging? 63% are not aware where the desludger dumps the sludge, and 46% are not even bothered about where the sludge is going. It's not my job. Absolutely, Pankaj, you're right. So, very clearly, and, this is the point that Ragini was making, that, it's not always about the knowledge. So 90% is a very high number, which, in research showed us that people already know that, fecal sludge flowing into open drains is spreading diseases. 90%, we don't need to go back to them and tell them that, if you don't do something about your fecal sludge, you will get diseases. That knowledge is already there. But is it being transformed into any, mindset difference? Is it being transformed into any concern for the environment or for the water that they're drinking or for, their children? Because I think this message of, you will get diseases if you don't do something about your fecal sludge has been going on in people's heads. But there is no urgency to act. It was still not being, transferring into any intention to act. Because 78%, more than 3/4, believe that a septic tank should be as large as possible, which basically means that 20 years, 30 years, 35 years of desludging, they will just avoid the act till they can. They will only do it in crisis. And that's what we wanted to really change. People have to own the behavior. If they don't, why will they respond to your communication? Absolutely. Yeah, Ragini, thanks. So the knowledge in itself about, diseases was there, but they did not know exactly what they have to do. I mean, the desludging has to be done regularly because the sludge can leach into the groundwater and contaminate their water. That reason to believe was not something that people knew. 78% believing that it's government's responsibility again is that, you're just passing the buck. And 63% not aware where it's ending means that, once they've flushed it, they've forgotten about it. So we had to change all of this mindset. These were the kind of findings that were very instrumental for us in drawing the patterns and mining insights, working in teams to, then understand that the majority believe in reactive desludging. Only in the case of crisis would they do it. And that's the mindset we have to change. And the next slide will really tell you, based on these findings, we came up with the 3 segments that we had to focus on. Next slide, please, Shibil. Thanks. So, based on all of this, based on the attitudes towards desludging as well as the behavior towards desludging, we created our, these 3 segments. We segmented our audiences on those who were connected to open drains. There were about 11% of these across these 3 centers. There were those, everybody was doing reactive desludging, but there was still 22% who were open to proactive desludging because they understood the concern with, reactive desludging. They understood that if they don't do it because it's not convenient, but they know that, this is not the right attitude that I have. Yes, I did not know that, if I have to desludge once in 3 years or I have to desludge once in 20 years, I wasn't aware of it. So I've never thought of, proactive desludging. But then there is the hardest nut to crack, which is also the biggest segment. which is the reactive desludgers, who are not desludging, who are desludging reactively only when required, but they're also not concerned about that act. So even when they are told that, this is leading to diseases, this is contaminating your water, they have a very incomplete knowledge and a very low self and collective efficacy to act on it. So this was the hardest nut to crack. So which is why, it was very important for us at the very outset to know how our audiences are different. In even, within that set of those who are connected to septic tanks and in sanitary toilet owners, there is a segment that is slightly more concerned and, will be the early adopters of any communication. And, it will be easier to motivate them as compared to the reactive desludgers. Next slide, please, Sibyl. Thanks. Now, from everything that I've presented, it was clear to us that the main problem that we were tackling was, how do we make fecal sludge a problem that people cannot ignore? How do we make the things, the fecal sludge, which is invisible to people right now, visible? Now, based on all this evidence collected from formative research and immersions, as well as our readings of various academic texts, we built a clear framework which led to the creation of, communication interventions to change the FSM behaviors. The 4 communication objectives that we wanted to focus on were the awareness of the need for a correct septic tank and the knowledge about what a correct septic tank means, because this was very important to start the journey of people making a difference. Next, those with the correct septic tanks had to know when to desludge and feel motivated to do it. Across the sanitation cycle that we talked about some slides back, we had to heighten the risk perception with indiscriminate dumping of fecal sludge, make that visible to people and heighten that risk perception. Now, you might be wondering, why did we stop at, knowledge, attitude, motivation? And if you see the communication objectives that we focused on, we're not talking about changing behavior right now. We're not saying that, people start desludging once every 3 years. We're still saying that, we need to build that awareness that that's the right behavior to do and make people motivate to do it. Because it was very important for us to also realize that this was a conversation we were starting. It was very important to take people down this journey by first making them aware of their actions and its repercussions, change their mindsets, motivate them to act, but not expecting them to break their incorrect septic tanks by just looking at the first message, right? So it's like, I think Ragini also said that it was never a linear line. It was never about, we just want you to build the right containment structures. We want you to desludge once every 3 years. We wanted them to first be aware of why do it, why, have these intentions as well, and then take them down the journey of, actually start to doing it. Now, after all the formative research, insight mining, we came up with this big idea for execution, which Ritra will take you through over the next few slides. But before I hand over to her, I just want to also highlight that each and every output that Ritra will take you through now was also pre-tested for appeal, for relevance, for comprehension, before taking out any of these outputs to our wider audiences. Ritra, over to you to take everybody through how this research led into the big idea that we finally took to the field.
Thanks, Varinder. Right. So as Varinder and Ragini both pointed out, we realized that people are not bothered by fecal sludge. The findings were relayed to you just now. The predominant attitude was to avoid the problem for as long as possible. People are disgusted by fecal sludge, but not enough to act to do the right thing. But they defer cleaning. Now, they'd also build incorrect septic tanks and they believed it was someone else's problem, right? Now, what we had to do was create a communication intervention that would address a couple of these issues. As Varinder mentioned, the key insight that came out of the immersion was out of sight is out of mind, which even I think Bidya ji on chat brought up, rightly so. Next slide, please, Jyotsna. So how do we then get people to care about fecal sludge? The answer was by doing something dramatic. We had to create something which is larger than life. By demonizing fecal sludge, by giving them a visual they can't get out of their head or ignore. Malasur became a visual representation, a personification of fecal sludge, with Mal being fecal waste and Asur, demon. Now, can anyone guess what inspired the idea of Malasur? Where have you heard Asura before? We've all grown up with it. Inspiration, of course, came from Indian mythology, of stories of Mahisasur, Ji Janchal Ji. So the inspiration was Indian mythology. We've heard so many stories of good overcoming evil. We've all grown up with these stories. Hence, we knew that people would relate to it. So we showed them that Malasur is in the overflowing septic tank, swimming in the open drains, contaminating water all the time. Malasur, therefore, is this evil threat to our health and well-being. But because we don't know it, we don't see it, it doesn't exist. So our creative strategy was to build up this character till our audiences notice it and capture it. Effectively, it was about making people the heroes who can slay the fecal sludge demon themselves. Next slide, please. Now, we needed to make the threat up close and personal, and therefore relevant to the audiences. Water, its source and quality was emerging as a national priority with the rise in water contamination. Now, this was an opportunity. What could be more potent, more relevant than linking Malasur to water? Water became a natural, powerful ally. Now, we gave people a reason to believe that Malasur is deadly if ignored. And the reason, and Varinder later will tell us that this reason to believe actually worked. In all the communication outputs, Malasur, of course, is central. But so was the message, save your water from Malasur, which you see in the droplet of water. Now, these are posters on the slide. This is just one communication output. I'm going to ask you, where does your eye go? When you look at these posters, what stays with you? How do you feel about it? You can put it on chat, or you can raise your hands, you can unmute. When you look at it, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? What does it make you feel? Disgust. Bilkul, Pankaj ji. Yes. A grave threat. Absolutely. Now, these are the kind of reactions we wanted to elicit from people, from the audience, right? We wanted to instill a sense of disgust, as you said. The water bucket could be contaminated by Malasur. It's the same bucket you use for bathing. The matka that you see in the middle is what you use in the kitchen. It's what you use to drink water from. And of course, the groundwater, it's a sacred source of water. Malasur could affect us in very, very personal ways, in many different ways. Hence, we wanted to use the cues of water to personalize the threat. But there are 3 basic mantras in these posters as well. 3 messages that if followed, you could beat Malasur. Now, the 3-message campaign was developed with the objective of keeping the communication crisp and with a clear call to action. That is, what do you want the target communities to do when they look at the posters or the communication? The first message, if you see, is build the right kind of septic tank. Now, all these 3 messages, a lot of you actually have already put in the chat when Ragini asked you, what FSM behavior would you like to change? The first message, building the right septic tank, which means 2 chambers and a soak pit, which is prescriptive. As Varinder also mentioned, many people had oversized tanks. Now, they may not want to break the tanks. They may not want to construct a new toilet. But then there are also other households who may be building a new house or a new toilet. It's still relevant to them. The second message of cleaning your septic tank once in 3 years is again prescriptive. And before it overflows, clean your septic tank before it overflows. We realize that giving people an instructional cue once in 3 years is helpful, even from a supply point of view. FSTPs and plants, in some cases, were not operating at capacity because the fecal sludge wasn't reaching them, right? So in reality, the second poster was also to promote regular desludging through licensed operators. And third message was about keeping an eye on where your sludge is being taken. The responsibility of the householder does not stop at the first two messages or the first two actions. They are expected to also act responsibly and report indiscriminate dumping of fecal waste. Hence the third message of Malasur. Now it's important for communication to affect cognition and emotion. That means your communication should affect the head and the heart. Logically, fecal sludge around you is not healthy. It's not right. But when you personalize it by making the threat personal, you're emotionally vested as well. Malasur as an idea was extendable and universal. So we created a 360-degree campaign that included outputs from outdoor, which meant your billboards, wall painting, CTPT branding, transit media, like your cesspool truck, van branding, bus branding, auto branding, digital, and audiovisual. Can anyone tell me, actually we can open the poll here, Jyotsna, if you could, there's a question on most effective platform.
Right, sure.
Now, the question is, which is the most effective form of communication? Was that unanimous? Okay, do we have most? Okay, 48%. Okay.
Yes. So we can show the responses?
Yes, please. Saying majority of the people are saying all of the above. Effective form of communication, yes. If it is a 360-degree intervention, which means across multiple platforms, it's also more likely that more people will see the campaign, and those who've seen it have the opportunity to see it multiple times till the message sinks in. Next slide, please. Now, Malasur actually started as a pilot in Berhampur. And as Varinder mentioned, it was pre-tested as well. And we conducted a reach and recall study, learnings from which we took to strengthen the campaign further. Tweaks in certain words, colors, schemes like that. Now, when the Malasur campaign was launched on World Environment Day last year by Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, we had also provided a toolkit with all the outputs, which were 165 outputs in 11 different languages, so that implementers could use it as a plug-and-play model to adapt and implement the intervention. Tool also contained instructions on scientific and strategic implementation, media planning, monitoring. Now, along with our partners in the NFSSM Alliance, including ASCII, we were able to support state and city governments to implement the Malasur campaign on the ground. And what you see here are representative images from the field. In fact, even despite COVID, cities and states have been implementing it in spurts, which is heartening to see. And as you see, it's across platforms. You'll see wall painting, CTPT branding, billboards, cesspool trucks. In fact, Chhattisgarh took it up, owned the campaign to an extent that they created their own extension. They developed a comic book for school children with Malasur as a central character. Next slide, please. Just to illustrate, in Warangal, Telangana, which launched the Malasur campaign, they did so across outdoor hoardings, wall paintings, transit media like Swachh autos, desludging trucks, passenger autos, miking with the jingle, and leaflet distribution. And it was launched in 48 out of 58 wards. It was a very collaborative effort. And they had 200 Swachh Dost enlisted to raise awareness door to door. They had extra licenses distributed among cleaners. Now, a phased rollout of an SBCC intervention is key. Why do you think that is important? Why should one phase the rollout? Ideally, if you've created a 360-degree intervention, do you think it's a good idea to release all of it at the same time with the multiple messages? Is that the right way to do things? Yes or no? Can anyone tell me why? Why do you think it's not good to release multiple messages on multiple platforms all at the same time? Just whatever comes to mind. Confusing. People have to remember this, keep thinking for some time. Okay. Yeah. Yes, it can be confusing. You see, BBC Media Action also, in consultation with ASCII and a media planning agency, we actually developed a scientific media plan, to identify what are the platforms locally that should be leveraged, that should be used, and B, in what frequency should the messages and the campaign be rolled out in what phases it should be rolled out in order to reach the maximum number of people, in order to have the most impact, right? A phased rollout. Yes, a phased rollout is important because it keeps the message alive. It keeps the issue alive among the same audience segment, and ensures newer segments of audience also see them. Phased rollout is also, it makes sure that people aren't confused about the multiple messages. It gives you the opportunity to keep refreshing it as well. You can keep adding extensions to it, additional assets, say for example, if you want to connect it also to sanitation worker safety. But in planning for phases and choosing the right platforms, media planning agency, they're experts that should be consulted. They work with softwares and tools that will tell you which platform has the highest visibility, which platform will give you the most return on investment, which platform will ensure high reach. And if you tell a media planner that I want to reach so many people in this much time, they're going to craft the plan for you accordingly, of course, budgets considering. It's not a guessing game. Trust in the expertise that can help you make informed decisions when it comes to implementing a SBCC intervention. It is a collaborative process. Now, the implementation in Warangal revealed to us, for instance, that the hyperlocal platform like Swachh Autos is actually a huge asset. Swachh Autos went door to door collecting garbage with the Malasur branding and the miking. And every auto on average visits as many as 700 to 800 households in a week. With a potential reach of over 1 lakh households in Warangal. Now, of course, the implementation process was facilitated by the Center for Urban Governance, NASCI, which is a technical support unit in AP and Telangana. And the campaign was implemented with the Greater Warangal Municipal Corporation resources as well. Campaign was also linked to Swachh Sarvekshan and Safai Mitra Suraksha Challenge. Next slide, please. Now, in developing the Malasur campaign, there were 3 distinct strategic considerations. And many of you actually responded on chat as well when I said, is it good to roll out all at the same time? But one of the things to keep in mind is that each output should have a single message. More than one would be complicating the issue, hampering understanding, and it would just make it a khichdi, right? No matter how tempting it can be, do not overload content. One output equals one message, else nothing will be registered or recalled. Now, every city may be different in where in terms of infrastructure, in terms of supply side readiness. If an FSTP is 2 years away from being functional, you can design your communication and call to action accordingly. Similarly, budgets also vary. There's no when it comes to budgets, no 2 ULBs will have the same amount. Media plans across cities and states need to be tailored. They need to be customized according to the existing government-owned platforms in that particular ULB or city, state. There are some hoardings that are government-owned. Wall paintings, you might have more government-owned walls. I mean, this makes implementation effective, but also cost-effective. You could use SHGs as facilitators for dissemination of information, of the communication. Now, the campaign would have to be done simply using as many touch points. That's something we've established. But when it comes to budgeting, when it comes to planning, one size does not fit all. Not when it comes to choosing the platforms or budgeting for them. But planning for these touch points ideally should follow a phased rollout, as I mentioned. So you're not implementing all messages at the same time, but sequentially. Now that you've seen the idea and its implementation, Varinder will now talk to you about the impact, the evaluation that we conducted, and the impact from the intervention. Over to you, Valinda.
Thanks, Ritika. Jyotsna, there was one more poll. If can we just put that up on impact?
Sure.
Thank you. Thanks. Yes. So, have your communication interventions been evaluated for impact?
Twenty responses we got. Let's wait for a couple of minutes.
Sure. I also realize I think we'll have about 10 more minutes of the presentation, and then we'll open the floor for question and answers.
Yeah, we have 67% responses. So I think.
Thanks. Okay, great. So 73% of you have actually evaluated for impact, and 27% have said no. So again, I think it's kind of good to know that we've most of us have understand evaluation and the importance of it. But just to say that we can go to the next slide, please, Shibil. Yeah, thanks. So, before I tell you about what we found out from our impact evaluation of Balasur, I wanted to harp a little bit upon the, importance of both monitoring as well as evaluation and how these two are really different, right? So, while monitoring is critical to ensure that the intervention is moving in the right direction, and it tracks and measures your program activities and your inputs, your process indicators, it's evaluation that goes beyond the intervention process and activities and focuses on whether your communication objectives have been met, have been achieved. Evaluation is the research process that tracks the project's outcomes, both short term as well as long term. So, mostly what's required in the case of evaluation, you would have heard of baseline and end line. That what is it that people were doing earlier, and how is it after the end of the program, where have we brought them, what's the behavior change that we've been able to achieve. Now this of course can be done in a very robust experimental way, where you have budgets and you're able to do a proper impact evaluation, but at some times it can also be done with small budgets, right? And we at BBC Media Action have also had the experience of doing very small effectiveness surveys where we did not have a control group, it did not have an experimental setting, but we still did go to the field and find out from those who were exposed to our our collaterals, our outputs, to find out what change it made in their lives, and then maybe compare it with the non-exposed to be able to also see if you can attribute it back to your program, right? So I think just shrugging off impact evaluation, because I think sometimes the perception is that it's a very cost heavy exercise, is also not right, because it can be done in different ways. And what's also very important is to note that in an evaluation, the integrity and the independence of research, of course, is very important, because if we are evaluating our own work, there is a very high chance of bias kind of creeping in. So understanding that we're doing it in an objective way, keeping allowing the researchers to remain objective. Sorry. The other very important thing is to triangulate different data sources. So not just relying on what you're listening from your own respondents, just basing it on that self-reported data, but if possible, triangulating it from data sources like if we take the example of FSM, and if there is a helpline number which was there in the Balasur outputs as well, how many calls did we actually get? I mean, this is something we've always discussed with ASCII, right? That one is the implementation around it, but then also the triangulation of different data sources. Then is it that the requisitions, the desludging requisitions, did they go up? And then maybe the number of trucks that were going to the FSM treatment plants, that went up. So the triangulation of data sources is pretty important as well. And thirdly, I'd like to mention that getting the ethical clearances and ensuring that your participants are always they are safeguarded is again very important. So looking at any independent ethical boards or just ensuring that is pretty important as well. With that, I'll go to the next slide, which is on impact of our work. Thanks. So Malasur was found to be, a very clutter-breaking idea, and in fact, by the virtue of it being a negative character, what really worked was that people turned around and looked at Malasur again. So it had that attention hook, which is why the reach was much higher. The When I come to impact of that, the connection between the untreated human waste and water contamination was the main thing that served as a trigger for action. Findings from our reach and recall study in Warangal very clearly showed that 70% people were positively disposed to calling the helpline. 76% respondents believed that Malasur can be defeated, and it can be defeated by desludging once in 3 years. And 68% had very high motivation to actually act on that, desludging once in 3 years. So this to us very clearly showed that when, an idea as disruptive as Malasur, and where you're connecting the fecal sludge, giving it a visible persona, and connecting it to water, there is this urgency to act. Because there was also Berhampur research that we had done, and where we did not connect it with water, and then there was Warangal research, which showed us very encouraging results. Moving on to the next slide, which further explains some of these findings. Thank you. So what you see from this slide very clearly is, the spontaneous description of the campaign itself was that, desludging once in 3 years, people said was the key message that they take out from this. And on the right-hand side, you can see that when they were talking about the harmful effects of Malasur, they were talking about the health impacts, and not just that, the fact that it will contaminate the drinking water. So, that reason to believe why they have to desludge once in every 3 years was now pretty clear. It was not just about, the 90% who was initially saying that, why we should do this is to give rise to the disease. It gives rise to diseases. Now the reasons to believe were coming out very clearly. With that, Ragini, I also see, I think your hand was up. But with that, I want to just hand over to Ragini, because we've taken you through different components of SBCC process. And Ragini will now talk about bringing it all together under, the overall planning of SBCC. Thank you.
Thanks, Virender. I didn't know my hand was up. I don't know how to put it down.
Okay.
Can we have the next slide? I'm very mindful of the time, and I'm going to start wrapping up this session. You've been an absolutely fantastic group to be able to talk to virtually, and Malini, thank you for that. But there are 2 points that I want to make. One is that at BBC Media Action, we talk about the science, art, and craft of SBCC. I hope one of the things that's clear from what we've discussed is that the science of SBCC lies in elements like research, like media planning. That is where you rely on evidence, on data, and don't guess. The art of SBCC lies in how you interpret research. You do not look at a single data point. You look at the research in an immersive way, and you see what that research is telling you about your audience to come up with a hypothesis. In the case of the Malasur case study, the hypothesis is that if you can increase awareness, knowledge, and risk perception, you can get people to own the issue of FSM and be motivated to desludge their septic tanks every 3 years. Where we moved from was not knowing the issue, not feeling that they owned it, to saying that, yes, I intend to motivate every 3 years. Whether that actually happened offline, we can assess that. That can be a longitudinal study. But I'm telling you that as SBCC practitioners, we have to be mindful of how and where this needle can go within the scope of what we have to work with. And lastly, when we come to the craft of SBCC, the craft lies in production, the craft lies in strategic planning, in following the process in letter and in spirit. The more rigorously you plan, the better your outcome will be. And that's how you come to the final, the showpiece of the art of SBCC, which is the creative content. That's what you'll reach your audience with. That's what will be clutter breaking. That's what will get their attention and make them think about the issue. But really think about it as a science, art, and craft. And remember that success depends on doing all three pieces to the best of your ability. One of the pieces that we haven't, the second point I wanted to make was that when we plan, in my experience, and as I think everybody who works with ULBs will find that the budgets are very small. For those of us who work on PIPs with government, what can be the basis for coming up with a communication budget? It can be, what was last year's budget or what was last year's spending, and you add a percentage over it. But with this approach, I'm asking you to take a very, fresh look at all of this. When you look at the rationale behind your budgeting, you look at how many people do you want to reach? How difficult is the behavior you are asking them to change? On what platforms will they access? How long does that message have to be visible to them? How many times do you want them to interact with the communication? So, will you refresh it once, twice, thrice? And then in order to do that, one very important resource is, do you have enough time to do it? If you're at the last 3 months of your execution cycle, how do you achieve all of this? When do you need to start? Who do you need at the table to plan? So do you need researchers? Do you need, creative agencies? Do you need media planners? Have you budgeted for all of them? Have you budgeted for production on those platforms you want to put your stuff on? And then, the whole piece about evaluation. So look at all the bits and pieces we've been talking about, and where are you planning to have the money, the expertise, and importantly, the time to do all of this. And more strategically, what is point A and what is point B? How far can you move? So if you have 3 months and 5 lakhs or 10 lakhs or 14 lakhs, limit. Your objectives have to come, these are iterative planning processes. You may want to achieve the sky, but you have to understand that the objective and the outcome has to be defined based on the resources that you put into your communication. It's very important because often people say communication doesn't work. I think it works every time if it's done well. And I hope you'll agree with me. And we're not going to, end this discussion just here. Rithira has a resource for you. We wanted to take this opportunity to share that with all of you. So Rithira, over to you.
Thanks, Ragini. Jyotsna, will you, next slide, please. We just wanted you all to know that as part of the NFSSM Alliance, next slide, please. We're collaboratively developing a primer with the science, art, and craft of approaching SBCC that we just spoke to you about today. And the objective of this primer is to provide practitioners and implementers with strategic thinking and tools for planning for behavior change communication interventions. Throughout the primer, the steps and the approach has been elaborated with the case study of Malasur, as we did today, because it follows a strategic process from inception to evaluation. Now, while the primer focuses on fecal sludge management, the idea is that the key takeaways and learnings can be applied to any thematic focus. And the primer will include tools and frameworks, right from research and creative and media planning brief to a communications framework, research tools, monitoring framework, detailing of media platforms, and approaching media planning. Now, while the development of this is still in process, you're the first ones to actually get a peek at it, really. And we expect that this will be completed in a month or so, and we'll be very happy to share this with all of you. And with this, we are open to comments and are happy to take any questions you may have. Thank you.
Pankaj ji had a question, I know, on pre and post test design, and Shashwat wanted to know about the impact of IPC in households for Malasur. Should we start?
Yes, so I've also answered Pankaj's question on chat. but happy to also just take it here. So Pankaj, what we did was, post the campaign, we did an impact evaluation where we did a recall and effectiveness study, basically, where we went to the exposed as well as the unexposed audiences. And, it was not just the knowledge this time. The main difference we saw was that alongside knowledge, it was the attitudes as well as the behavioral intent within the exposed audiences, where there was a significant change when you compare with the unexposed to our campaign. So, which is when we knew that we were on the right track, because now you start seeing, and I think the figures that I showed to you as well, right, that about 60, over 60% now said that they are actually intending to desludge more regularly, as compared to earlier, these figures being really minuscule. 66% were actually saying that, they would still do reactive desludging only in the case of crisis during affirmative. So this is where we saw a key difference. And I think one more question was there on what really worked. I think, like I said, I think the main learning across different researchers was that when we made that threat more personal by connecting it to water, made it more urgent, I think that was one very big trigger that worked for us, giving them a reason to believe.
We'd also love to hear your voices. So do unmute yourselves, put your cameras on if you feel like it. Any other questions? Malini, there had been one at the start. What was that?
We have a hand raised by Mr. Pankaj, so maybe we can take.
Of course.
Pankaj, sir, please go ahead.
Okay, can I come in? Can you hear me?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay. First of all, thank you very much for a very, very beautiful presentation. And I also see, very impactful in terms of, changes actually, not just in terms of people knowing it, but also the behavior aspect of that. And then you also already, clarified that, exposed and unexposed section of the community, and then you were able to identify what has been the change. My concern here is that, the issue here is the direct linkage between the wastewater and the water we drink. Malasur, fantastic. And then we also see, a lot of collaterals over here and there when you are there in a ULB or maybe, in urban areas. Specifically, a lot of work has been done using the Malasur campaign. But I'm still not able to, identify that how people are able to make a kind of connect. Because, if you see the typical old school of, wash professionals, we actually use the fecal oral contamination, chart, where it is very clear that, if you defecate in open and we are able to, make it sure through arrows and 5F rule that these are the 5 areas or, things by which you can get the fecal contamination coming to your mouth. But here it's just, a kind of a campaign where there are posters and where you can't even see the septic tank. But again, you have a message that the water actually, contaminates the your drinking water, the water which is actually going out of your, septic tank. Knowing the fact that, people don't even bother that once I flush, I don't even bother, whether the water is going. And then secondly, if I open the tap, I don't even bother from where the water is coming. So that linkage, I'm still not able to understand very well that how that was actually taken care of in terms of people's understanding of direct fecal oral contamination. If you could answer that, that will be really very helpful for us. Thank you.
Marinder, do you want to take that? Or
I can take it, Ragini, and
from
feel
pretest
well.
experience, or Ithira? How would you like?
So I can start by answering, and if there's anything, just fill in, Ragini. So a couple of things, Pankaj. Thanks for a very interesting question. So firstly, it was not just the posters that you saw here. Unfortunately, we've not been able to show the film, which again, talks about how we take people actually through the entire sanitation value chain. There is a truck taking the sludge from their houses, and if they are instead of indiscriminately dumping it, what is the rightful place where it should go. So there is that entire film that we have developed. Alongside that, the Warangal thing that we had checked, it was again not just the posters on Swachh Autos and what Rithira was talking about. There was also the jingle and everything. Coming to your point, particularly about how fecal sludge management and how we connected it to water. Yes, we did not give in too much of science, because also understand that we are talking to our audiences sometimes you're restricted by, how much of that reason to believe that you want to give in without overloading their information. So we connected it to water, but we did not go through that entire, like you're saying, how the wastewater will reach to your, drinking water, but we made a very direct connect. But this was the time when, the drinking water, all of that thing was really picking up during the Jal Shakti ministry. We knew that, water contamination is definitely a problem when we're talking about fecal sludge management. There is groundwater, leaching and everything. So we decided to connect it to water in that sense. But Ragini, feel free to add to that answer.
Pankaj, I think you've raised a wonderful question. And the rethink of SPCC comes from precisely this. We are so used to crafting very didactic interventions. All the dots have to line up. We fail to see that people are highly intuitive. You suggest something. It's not that, they are going to become the sanitation expert who can describe the 5 ways. But the idea clicked. There's something happening that's risky, and there's something I can do about it. It's that mental shortcut that you can provide with communication. One route is certainly, the kind that you described that, sanitation experts have used. But here is proof that there are multiple approaches. You need to, first of all, make the issue visible. It's not necessarily that, it's the minute we look at, the stimulus and the response, the communication output, when you want a direct cause and effect relation, that's when things get murky. The point is that you addressed an audience that was refusing to say that this is my problem. Maine flush kar diya, ho gaya. And somehow you alert them to the fact that, look, buddy, you're part of the problem. Somewhere, even if the government treats the water that comes back to your house, there is vast amounts of fecal sludge being discharged. And that's all the point we needed to make. They did express their intent. It was no longer that, I've done my bit, that's it. I use the toilet, I have a septic tank, enough, get off my back. That's not what we saw. Any other question?
I have a question. I don't see the hand raise option on my interface.
Go ahead, Mr. Shashwat, please ask.
Even if we are successful in establishing the water and feces linkage, let's consider it 3 years versus whenever the tank fills up. How do we encourage them? Because anyway, even if it is 3 years or tank filled, the fecal matter is contained in the tank. What exact key message we deliver to the household that they are okay with selling out more money by emptying it more frequently? How do we make them understand it?
That's you don't need to be exact. My point is that when you talk about a demon, you don't wait for the attack. Shashwat, that's the triggering you do. 3 years is a ballpark time. If you have a smaller, remember that the exact message was desludge every 3 years before your septic tank overflows. So if you have a tiny one, if you live in the JJ clusters in Delhi, for example, which are slums where people have been relocated, they have very tiny septic tanks and they're desludging every 6 months because they have lots of people there. But the point is that there is a demon lurking. Please react, please respond. So the precision that you're demanding is the precision of the expert steeped in, the whole technicality. This is what, Professor Chari would know how that if this is your tank volume and when will it fill up, and we're never going to get everybody in the population to that level of precision. But what you can do is that big chunks of people, 73%, 50%, 68%, you can get them to get the idea of what needs to happen. So a lovely question is demonizing. Can we have that question up? Is demonizing
a natural process?
And
Sujay, would you like to just share your question, and after that, Mr. Nagesh also has his hand up. Mr. Sujay, would you just like to speak it out?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Thanks. I think excellent presentations. One thing that was striking me, I think the concept of demonizing this was a unique idea, absolutely. The only thing I was wondering is that will it affect other SBCC campaigns on other equally important issues when you have already, you understand what I'm trying to say, demonized one process, you can't use this technique repeatedly. And the fact that we have reached that stage with this campaign, will that affect other campaigns, say on health? Like I'm telling you, one of our studies we have done from UNICEF on the SBCC campaign on the current corona pandemic and the need to hand wash. I mean, there were efforts to also say that आपके हाथ में ऐसा लग रहा है, मतलब ये जो pandemic और ये जो virus है, it is going to effectively impact your health and all that, and trying to connect it with this kind of, you know, bhoot, asur, demon, but it's becoming very hard for people to respond. So is it an overkill?
It can be offer a solution. Sujoy, the key point is there is a lot of behavioral theory on fear messaging. And we know that people instinctively, when they are afraid, they have a flight or fight kind of a response, right? Look at what happened in the early era of HIV messaging. The fear factor was that, you know, HIV or AIDS can kill you. And automatically people shut down, I'm going to die. It's later on that we revised it to begin talking about ART, to begin talking about the need for an early diagnosis and the fact that it's manageable. And that's why I say bring in the experts. So it depends on how you play this. Are you offering a solution that is doable? If you do that and you use fear, if it gets you what you want, I mean, I'm not, see, first of all, one of the principles is that a campaign has to be clutter breaking. So when you talk about an overkill, if everybody is going to jump onto the same bandwagon, obviously you cease to be original. So that's one. It never works to be repetitive. There is a lot for the audience to consume. You have to be clutter breaking. In this case, it worked. And
just one additional question, Siraj. Just if you were asked as an SBCC expert to compare the Akshay Kumar and Amitabh Bachchan's campaign of Darwaza Band with the Malasur campaign, I know it could be professional issues there, but just as an expert, so when you're speaking with an Indian urban or rural community, so what do you think? Which you think would be much more effective? You know. Yeah.
No, effectiveness depends upon multiple things. Effectiveness can go just by star value if you look at reach and recall. Akshay Kumar ko dekha. You're not going to be able to do that in 14 lakhs. I'm not even going to comment on, you know, which, because it's comparing apples and oranges. The point is, what do you have as a ULB? Malasur was designed for a ULB. And what are the budgets? What is your playroom? Who are the stars or the non-stars, and therefore you have to create your own. That's the point of it.
Just one thing, if I could add, just one quick point to what Ragini said, if I could add, Sujoy, to your question. See, it's also about, you know, if it's Akshay Kumar, Amitabh Bachchan campaign, I'm not talking about the one that you're saying, but sometimes it's the celebrity value that can also, you know, give you the reach, but is it also giving you the impact, right? I mean, if people, the recall value is that I saw Akshay Kumar and, you know, not taking home the message and actually acting on it, then I don't think it's really, you know, worked in that sense. So I think it's taking the reach, taking the engagement, and understanding the impact of everything that we do. I think we all have to just understand that, you know, there are these
great. No, because a point only, because if you look at the sanitation program in India, what I can recall in campaigns, one was the initial Vidya Balan campaign where, you know, all those and go to toilet and go outside. And the other one that used to strike was the what we said, the Amitabh Bachchan, Akshay Kumar, you know, Darwaza Band. And the third one is the Malasur campaign. All three have been big. All three have, I think, significant, I don't know, you guys would know more, but it would be great to have an analysis of each of these three and what really worked more. I know it's very specific subject and place, but that will be great to know because many of our colleagues online are really going to start campaigns now in their areas in the next few months. So that will be good input for them to what.
I think it would be great to see the return on investment. The best thing would be that after looking at the impact, also doing a budget assessment and looking at the return on investment of each and every of these campaigns. That would be very useful. Yeah.
Correct.
So, Mr. Nagesh, would you still want to ask your question, or has it been answered already?
Just a short question, Steve.
Sure, go ahead.
So thank you, BBC Media team, for excellent presentation, and my opportunity. I have been seeing this presentation second time, so you already had a session with us. Just one specific question that we had a very comprehensive campaign, which is Malasur, and then it was implemented for like 3 months or so in different ULBs across India. Now, what about the phase 2 and phase 3 of Malasur? Because we have raised concern that this is happening and which is wrong, and we have to act. But now, what would be the phase 2 and phase 3 of it? And do we really have a long-term behavior change communication strategy about it? So this is just a quick one.
Nagesh, I think that's a conversation we need to take offline, because BBC Media Action works with donor funding. There can definitely be long-term planning. There can definitely be a meta-analysis, as Sujay talked about. All of it takes resources. So yes, is the idea extendable? Does it still have potential? We can work on that. And we can work on it collectively as a, as the group that's present here. But I don't think, that's a one-line answer from Rithira, Varinder, and me. So will you excuse us on that?
So, Ragini, Varinder, Rithira, just in the interest of time, fantastic presentation. Thank you so much for putting this together. And great takeaways. I'm not closing the question, but I just feel so compelled to speak. I mean, it's so important, some of the points you have brought forward, that every town may have very, very different contexts. And that's what your study also showed. So, which means that from a state department point of view, while you may have some budgets or a strategic approach built, ultimately, when it comes to implementation, your recommendation would be that each ULB needs to take up assessment to understand what is the behavior change which is critical and needs to be prioritized for that particular ULB. Sometimes and oftentimes we see that ULBs have a tendency to pick up a national IEC material and sort of roll it out in their town quite sporadically, randomly. They have budgets, but it is not systematically planned out. The channels, the right channels of communication are not planned out. The most convenient channel may have been picked up. So at this point, to all the members here in the team, I would like to make a strong case for engaging, for ULBs to engage professionals to look at this entire process of SPCC. It might, at least for the initial couple of years, till the time the ULB builds a team and capacities to continue taking up behavior change communication program. And even if we go purely by the Swachh Sarvekshan, results of which towns are doing well, engaging professionals for SPCC has been a core component, a feature of the towns which have consistently been doing well on the Swachh Sarvekshan as well. So definitely I see a need for professionals to be engaged. The primer which is being planned by NFSM Alliance with support from BBC Media is very timely, and that is made for professionals to implement it. a ULB staff may not be able to use the primer directly without being trained. So that's where all of us on this group will play a big role in using the primer for conducting the training. And Ragini has already emphasized the importance of keeping budgets aside. And it is not about keeping high budgets, but it is about thinking through it and planning. For example, the program that was rolled out in Warangal for a period of 3 to 4 months, it costed the town just about 5 to 6 lakhs because they were very smart in using the assets of its ULB, whether it was public toilets, its own buildings, its own boarding boards, its own autos. So they did a smart planning of the budget. So it's not about high budgets, but it's about being able to foresee it and plan it in advance. And of course, no compromise on attempts at monitoring the rollout, seeing that the messages are rolled out consistently, and ability to measure the impact and change course if required. So again, I bring back, please hire professionals to help the ULBs, at least for the initial couple of years. It's not possible for the ULBs at this point of time to roll it out by themselves. Prasachari, would you like to share some experiences and thoughts on this very important topic?
No, I think everything is covered. Thank you very much. And I'm not a professional in this space, so I will not venture into this space, but I can just say the engineers on this group, as well as the technical personnel in this group, you earmark about 1 to 1.5% of any project for preparation of DPR, detailed project. That's how we operate. All of us. I get paid for 1 to 1.5% of a project of 100 crores. So I get about 1 crore as a consulting fee. The reason is you believe that you need right kind of engineering, right kind of science to make sure that the water and the wastewater flows and gets treated as per the science and as per the technology that we need. Now, this is exactly what Ragini and the whole colleagues, Varinderji and Rita, mentioned about the art and science of behaviors communication. It's a science. So we need to have that professional outlook. We need to have budgets, and we need to have capacities. And as Dr. Malini said, okay, we can hire, but also we need to be competent enough. Everything, there's not many people also to hire in the market. So I think it's important to capacitate the technical engineers and other professionals in the municipalities so that we can become social engineers. I think that's very important. Just like to say that look at our vaccination. When Honorable Prime Minister speaks about free vaccination and everybody is asked to take vaccination, the uptake of vaccination and vaccination hesitancy still prevails in the country. So despite having very sharp messaging, high power messaging, still there are behavior issues. Now imagine something like sanitation and something like particularly FSM, which is not very life-threatening as life-threatening as probably Corona. So you see the importance of bringing the right kind of communication. Otherwise, all our investments in FSTPs, all our investments in infrastructure will go down the drain unless we make this last mile connectivity. I think that's the takeaway for me. And for all the engineers in this Namami Gange and all the colleagues, folks, you need to start thinking about behavior change as a science and not just poster making. Generally, हम बैठते हैं municipality में अच्छा सा बोलते हैं commissioner एक 200 पोस्टर यहाँ पे छपवा दो या posters government of India ने दे दिया उसको वहाँ पे लगाइए, but उससे ज़्यादा impact होता नहीं. I think that's the key message coming out from this conversation. So I think this is super useful. Thank you very much. I mean, for friends from UNICEF, this is you deal with it day in and day out. But for the non-UNICEF engineers on the group, commissioners on the group, it's very important to recognize that you need to develop your teams. You need to develop your change champions. Need not be in the municipality, but there are always champions outside the municipality. Nurture them, get them trained, so that they can become our ambassadors for in these communication programs. So I think that's all out of Malini. I mean, this is just from my experience as an engineer. I've learned, speaking to friends from BBC Media, I've learned over a period of time that this infrastructure will not be very impactful unless and until we bring all the elements together. Thank you very much.
Dr. Malini, can I come in, Pankaj, this side? Just a very quick comment.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay. It's for us, just because when Professor Chari was speaking about it, and then also have given, a lot of experience, as well as, our latest experience on be it, mask or be it the vaccination part of it. I think, one of the important aspect of behavior change is also mobilizing the communities for a collective behavior change, which is actually, missing in most of our, SBCC. But we have seen as part of the Open Defecation Free campaign that the collective behavior change is the key. It means, if I expect people to do something, people also expect me to do something for that. And there has to be a social norm in the community. If people are, going beyond that kind of behavior, people should actually raise voice. And in FSM, it also becomes very important. So if one person is going out for open defecation, people should be able to, restrict the person not to go for open defecation. I think same is also required in FSM. If I am taking an action, be it Malasur campaign or anything, to stop my septic tank to overflow, or to stop my septic tank to discharge water in the open drain. Same time, I should also be able to raise a voice if my neighbor is actually doing it, because it's very important. And I also link it with the, I think the question which probably Ragini or somebody raised, that, 67% people or 87% doing it. No, it has to be, 100%. But because even if, one person is discharging water in open drains from the septic tank, it is as, bad as everybody doing it. So I think probably the second stage or the next stage of the overall behavior change is actually to incorporate the issues related to the collective behavior change and making it a social norm in the community. So that's all from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And just to end the evening on a positive and maybe humorous note, I really liked Bindyaji's comment where she has said that the communication strategy is very important, but it should be followed coupled with enforcement, which means no matter how much we talk about masks and not going out, danda padega to sab theek hoga. So that also is required alongside communication. Ragini is not happy with this, and Ragini, sorry about it. But I think the point here is not danda, but the point is regulation and enforcement as well is required. So particularly, there is one more point which has come. I mean, I was just scrolling through the comments, is that there is a thinking that perhaps the behavior of desludging once in 3 years might be simpler than to achieve than getting people to construct right type of septic tank. So I think that's also an important point which has come out. And thank you very much, everyone, for being so participative. And because Ragini gave such a strong no, so no danda, only SBCP for all of us.
No, Malini, seriously, this is about voluntary behavior change. And what Pankajji talked about communities coming together, that's certainly the next phase of communication. He's pointed us in the right direction. And Pankajji, one day I'll have a conversation with you about how we attempted it and what failed and what worked. But thank you all for being such a wonderful group to talk to. It's lovely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Have a great
everyone.
weekend. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.